Hello, cats and kittens, felines and felidae, humans and variant humans, and every race, class, and subclass. Welcome to another episode of Brittany the RPG Cat. Tonight, we are doing Tabletop Lore. We're going to complete the last two chapters of Eberron, Rising from the Last War. And, is that I had realized that when I was reading during Eberron Part 6 that there were just two more probably pertinent chapters. The chapters that I had wanted to skip out had to do with the types of treasures that you would find and then the Monsterpedia that's at the back of every one of these books. But there are still two chapters that I should read. Besides that, we're going to cover that tonight. And if we make it under the 2-hour mark, I do have something pulled up that would probably serve as a pretty interesting bonus. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't know what my reading pace is going to be tonight, and I don't want to disappoint because this is actually, this is a module that I've been wanting to read for some time, and I might want to take an episode in order to highlight, everything that I haven't been reading while I've been reading Eberron. So we're going to finish this, and then I'm going to have an announcement about the next two books that I'm going to be covering as soon as I'm completed with this one. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Once again, we're partnered with GreatMedia.Games to bring you inexpensive TCG single cards. Visit GreatMedia.Games and use the code 10Finity at checkout for 10% off of your online purchase. This stream is also brought to you by our donation campaign supporting Extra Life. I'm teamed up with other members of GreatMedia.Games in order to take donations supporting Children's Hospital Colorado. I'll have my links open from now until December 31st. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's get to business. Let's finish the last part of Eberron Rising from the Last War, Chapter 4, Building Eberron Adventures. You can see why I didn't skip this one, because this is probably the most important part of any world-building book, is what do they use in order to build adventures. I pray your weekend has been treating you well, says O.S. Devon. Yeah, it's been treating me alright. Honestly, I've barely done anything at all except for, write for the campaign for the next episode of One Shots from the Meowing Portal, which I do believe is going to be filmed tomorrow afternoon. And so depending on how I feel about that, I might come on for the stream on Sunday, but if not, then, you'll probably see me this coming Tuesday where I play Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG with GreatMedia.Games. And so because of the timing of all of this is that I'm going to be recording on Sunday, I am probably going to be releasing the next episode the following Wednesday. So, just because that's really the amount of time that I know it's going to take me in order to complete the editing. So, you're going to be AFK for bio break, but I've got the wireless headset on. Oh, well, that's perfectly fine. Alright, so anyways, the last war. Corvair is still rising from the ashes of the last war. The consequences of a century of conflict can't be offset with a single treaty. The last war didn't end because people resolved their differences, and it didn't end with a victor. It ended when the mourning destroyed Sire because people were afraid that the war itself was the cause of that cataclysm, and that continuing the struggle could doom them all. Many are sick of the endless conflict and embrace the peace, but just as many yearn to finish what their ancestors started, and others see potential profit for themselves in war. Some leaders focus on healing the lingering wounds of the conflict, while others work to ensure that their people will have an edge when fighting begins anew. The last war is one of the primary themes of Eberron. When developing an adventure in Corvair, consider how the lingering impact of the war could affect the story. Some element of the war could drive the adventure. The heroes could be tasked with recovering a relic lost in the war, or capturing a fugitive war criminal. But it can also be a background note that simply adds flavor to a story. If the adventure features a group of bandits, perhaps they're deserters, which can be all the more interesting if they once served in the army of the same nation as one of the player characters. This section works at the different ways that the last war can influence an adventure. Personal impact. As players develop characters in an Eberron campaign, you can work with them to determine the role that the war played in their background. Here are a few topics for conversation. Did their character fight in the war? If so, which nation did they serve and what role did they fill? If more than one of the characters fought in the war, did they serve together as allies or did they fight on opposing sides? Military service can be the basis of a strong connection between two or more characters. Civilian life. If a character is from one of the 5 nations and didn't fight in the war, how and why did they remain on the sidelines? Did they oppose the war? Did they do something to avoid conscription? Or was there a reason they were considered unsuitable for service? Personal loss. What did the characters lose during the war? Did the members of the family die, and if so, how? Was the village they grew up destroyed, and if so, who was responsible? If the characters are from Sire, have they lost their nation? Do they have any loved ones left? Do they spend time in a refugee camp or on the outposts of New Sire and Breland? Do they support Prince Oragev as the leader of Sire, or do they have other ideas for the nation's future? For example, when an Ondarian player character meets a group of Eldeen druids, it's an opportunity to explore the bad blood between Ondar and the Eldeen reaches and to determine if this interaction has any personal relevance to the character. If a player character has a soldier background, you can introduce an NPC as a former comrade and work out the details with the player on the spot. The personal impact table provides ideas for plot hooks that could directly involve a player character in a scenario. Personal impact, a D6 table. 1. A former comrade in arms asks a player character for help. 2. One of the adventurers is from a place destroyed during the war. Refugees from that location ask for their help. 3. One of the characters that served with the villain during the war and the villain betrayed them or their nation. 4. The villain was a cruel commander of a camp where one of the characters was held as a prisoner of war. 5. One of the adventurers made a promise to a comrade during the war, and achieving a goal of the adventure will fulfill that promise. And 6. The adventure revolves around something one of the characters saw during the war, a powerful weapon, an unusual battlefield, or a unique warforged. Bitter grievances. Alliances shifted during the war, and almost every nation has grievances with every other one. Some of the post-war feuds rage more fiercely than others. Whether the sources of tension could play a role in the character's backstory, the plot of an adventure, or the reactions of an NPC. Although the nations are afraid to return to all-out war, any of these feuds can escalate. Ondar and the Elden Reaches. 40 years ago, the farmers of Western Onder joined with the druids of the Towering Woods in seceding from the kingdom and founding the Eldeen Reaches. Most Ondarians consider this unforgivable act of treason committed at a time of national weakness. The researchers say that their actions were precipitated by the neglect and corruption of the Ondarian nobles. Now that the war is over, many Ondarians believe Queen Arala should reclaim the Eldeen Reaches, whether through diplomacy or force. Breland and Drome. Monstrous raiders from the western wilderness have plagued Breland for centuries. A decade ago, the daughters of Sorakel united the scattered warlords of the region under the flag of Dromes. Furious clashes erupted between Breland and Drome, centering on the forces of Orkbone and Baelish settlers in the west. Breland led the opposition to recognizing Drome as a nation under the Treaty of Thronehold, and some Baelish believe that King Bornel should take dramatic action to end this threat. Sire and the world. Sirens maintained that they alone were in the right during the last war, which began when the other nations refused to acknowledge the Siren Queen's rightful claim to the throne of Galifar. Proud until the end, Sire clashed with all the other nations. Now Sire is destroyed, and Siren refugees everywhere are dependent on the kindness of their former enemies. But many of these people believe that Sire deserves no mercy, and that the refugees should be treated as enemy combatants rather than offered charity and compassion. Carnath and Thrain. The enmity between these two nations runs far deeper and longer than what was wrought by the last war. Thrain is the bastion of the Church of the Silver Flame, while Carnath resorted to necromancy during the course of the war. Thrains accuse Carns of being morally bankrupt. Carns say that the Thrains are arrogant and naive. This long-standing rivalry led to an intense conflict in the early days of the war, and it only grew worse. When Thrain became a theocracy, Karn seized on this act as a proof of the nation had abandoned the traditions of Galifar. When Carnath integrated undead into its armies, Thrain swore it would never be at peace with those who would use such foul magic. Both nations have accepted the terms of the Treaty of Thronehold, and the Carnathi king has forsworn the creation of new undead soldiers, but the treaty has done nothing else to ease the enmity in between the two. Thaliost, not Thaliost, just Thaliost. The ancient city of Thalios was once part of Under, and it has many proud ties to the history of that nation. It was seized by Thrain during the last war, and the Treaty of Thronehold ratified its occupation of the place. Thrain placed an Ondarian archbishop, Solgar Darinzu, in charge of the city, and has become a haven for Ondarian followers of the Silver Flame. But many of its citizens consider themselves to be Ondarians, and many prominent cities of Onder are putting great pressure on Queen Arala to retake the city. The tension has been exacerbated by Archbishop Darinzu, who has taken brutal action to suppress Ondarian opposition to Thrain's occupation of the city. And Valinar. The elves of Valinar have broken the terms of the Treaty of Thronehold on several occasions. They regularly antagonize their neighbors, raiding and provoking everyone in reach of their warbands. Some independent warbands have even crossed the Talenta Plains to raid across the borders of Carnath and Kabara. High Queen Vodelia insists that these are the actions of individual soldiers, but he refuses to take action against the perpetrators. Some scholars believe Vodelia and the Valinar game are trying to provoke a full-scale conflict. By the strictures of their religion, they don't want to be conquerors. They want a powerful enemy to attack their nation. If this hypothesis is true, they might continue to escalate their activity until Carnath or another powerful nation is forced to react. Though the Valinar regularly raid their neighbors, these attacks rarely target civilians. These elves aren't interested in wealth or territory. They're looking for challenging battles. They might attack military outposts, patrols, adventurers, or other brigands, any force that seems like it might put up a good fight. Everyday impact. There's no place in Corvair that escaped the last war unscathed. Even villages that were never attacked lost their children to conscription or suffered from shortages. Some towns far from the front lines suffered damage from long-distance magic weapons or terror attacks. Anytime that you are setting a scene, you can add some element that speaks to the ongoing impact of the last war. Everyday impact, a D6 table. 1. A supply shortage has been causing tension in the community. This shortage could be of a basic commodity such as bread, a luxury item such as wine, or an important service. 2. Demonstrators in the streets are protesting against refugees or warforged, urging a return to war, complaining about shortages or neglect, or drawing attention to the needs of veterans, refugees, or others. 3. A disabled veteran shares war stories while begging for copper. 4. A crowd has gathered around two people engaged in a heated discussion about the war. 5. A street vendor is selling unusual souvenirs from the war, pieces of a warforged titan, shards of an airship, and other curiosities. Or 6. A memorial has been raised to commemorate members of a community lost in the war. The Cold War. No one knows what caused the mourning, and the fear of repeating this cataclysm, not the Treaty of Thronehold, is what keeps potential combatants at bay. No one is happy with the outcome of the war, but no one dares to continue fighting since all believe that a renewed full-scale conflict could result in utter destruction. That said, the general belief is that the mystery of the mourning will eventually be solved. Either someone will learn how to control the power that caused the mournland, or the precise cause will be determined, and people will still be able to tell if it still poses a threat. Many people truly hope that the last war will live up to its name forever, but others prepare for more war even as they pursue peace. First and foremost, every nation wants to unravel the mystery of the mourning. A nation that could learn how to use this power could be unstoppable. Other forces are searching for weapons or forgotten powers that could turn the tide if another war breaks out. Adventurers could find themselves racing through ruins in Kendrick, trying to destroy a weapon of the ancient giants before the Emerald Claw can claim it for Karnath and Lady Ilmaro. The characters can stumble into a web of intrigue without seeing the sticky strands. Perhaps if a patron hires the adventurers to transport what seems to be an ordinary backpack full of goods, and they don't realize it has a secret magical compartment until enemy spies come looking for whatever's inside it, or a dying spy presses an amulet into the hand of one of the adventurers saying, "The fate of Breland demands that on you getting this to Boronel. Don't trust anyone." Assuming the adventurers care about the fate of Breland, they're pressed into an urgent adventure that has implications that they might not see or understand. I return. Thank you for coming back, O.S. Devon. Okay, playing during the last war. In your campaign, you might want to take a look back at the war as it unfolds. Setting an adventure during the last war puts the characters in a tumultuous time of political intrigue, tenuous alliances, and brutal conflicts. Consider these ways to make the last war a present reality in your campaign. The players can create new characters who lived during a specific phase of the war. These characters could be figures of legend whose great deeds are known to the present-day characters, or they could be unknowns caught up in events much larger than themselves. You might run into an introductory session or a flashback set during the waning years of the war, bringing the characters' backgrounds to life. Maybe the characters are all part of the same unit in that war, or they might be enemies forced to cooperate when disaster strikes. Are the characters participants in a memorable battle? Do they take actions that later regret? Do they make a bitter enemy who comes back to haunt them years later when the campaign continues in the present day? Or a magical phenomenon might send the characters back in time, putting them in the middle of the conflict. Are they transported there to learn something, to alter the course of history, or are they just stranded in a twisted time stream? How will they escape the horrors of the war and get back to their own time? Villains of the last war. War criminals. What horrific actions did a villain take during the last war? Did they massacre civilians, betray their comrades or their nation? A brilliant artificer might have designed arcane weapons that violated the rules of engagement. A Karnathi Bone Knight could have overseen a camp where prisoners of war were used as subjects in necromantic experiments. Is the villain infamous for their crimes, or they have yet to be exposed for what they did? Do they believe that their crimes were justified? Is the criminal protected by powerful people in their nation, or reviled by the people that they served? Grim inspiration. Something that the villain saw or experienced during the war made a lasting impression that still drives them today. Perhaps their family was killed in a senseless attack, and everything they are doing is motivated by a desire to avenge this loss. Maybe they think that they were betrayed by their own nation. Perhaps they are caught in the mourning and even though they somehow survived it, what they lived through drove them insane. A former comrade. A former comrade in arms can be a useful hook to draw adventures in a story, or a compelling villain. Which one of these characters served alongside the villain? Were they equals, or was one of higher rank? Did the villain abandon or betray the adventurer, or was it the adventurer who betrayed the villain? This option can be especially interesting for a Warforged villain. While searching for their own identity following the war, they have embraced a dark path. If you use this motif, it's important to develop the story in conjunction with the players whose characters are connected to the villain, either establishing crucial details ahead of time, or developing them together by way of a flashback. The war-torn survivor. At first meeting, the villain of an adventure might seem to be a person of honor, or at least a hard-scrabble survivor doing what they think is right after surviving the war. The villain might have experienced some of the same things in war that the characters did, making it easy for the characters to understand the villain's point of view, or at least to harbor a sliver of doubt that makes them think twice before trying to condemn the villain. The War-Torn Villains table suggests twists you can add to the villains mentioned elsewhere in this chapter to give them and their schemes a tie to the last war. Okay, War-Torn Villains, a D6 table. 1. The villain doesn't know or refuses to believe that the war has ended. 2. The villain experienced horrors during the war and targets the people they believe to be responsible. 3. The villain is using the skills that they learned during the war to target war profiteers or national leaders. 4. The villain is a former military commander who commands soldiers who served them under the war. 5. The villain is an ex-soldier with a grudge against citizens of a former enemy nation. 6. The warrior wants the power to restart and properly finish the war. A fortified outpost. An outpost, as shown on map 4.5, is a simple bearing holding barracks, officers' quarters, and storage areas encased with multiple rings of fortification. A normal approach to inner compound involves passing through one of the two gatehouses, crossing an open courtyard, passing through another small gate area, and traversing the training yard before finally reaching the entrance. A enormous magic weapon akin to a ballista is mounted atop of the outpost and supported by a massive stone column. Depending on the outpost, this weapon might launch ballista bolts with tremendous force and speed, and expel surges of lightning, hurl fireballs, or otherwise send devastating munitions at approaching enemies. A basement area is dedicated to storage, including holding cells to including holding cells that contain prisoners of war while they wait to be transported to dedicated prison camps. And this is the map of a fortified outpost. At the top is that very large cannon weapon that is situated on the rooftop. Stairs to one side of the ballista are located here, and this is a second watchtower. The main level of it, they show that the courtyard that has 3 separate entrances inside. They have the barracks, the area, the ladder up to the roof, and areas that go down to the cellars, which is labeled here on the bottom as fortress, cellars, and dungeons. Fortified Outpost Adventures, a D8 table. 1. The Order of the Emerald Claw has seized the outpost and is raising a legion of undead soldiers. 2. The outpost is said to be haunted by the vengeful spirit of a former commander who has slain by their own troops. 3. A tunnel beneath the outpost leads to a sealed portal to Zoriat. 4. The outpost borders the Mournland where mutant monstrosities emerge from the mist. 5. When a force of aberrations arises from Kyber, this abandoned outpost is the adventurer's only chance to stop their advance. 6. The outpost is in a critical location, but it was damaged during the war and needs to be protected while it is being restored. 7. The outpost is located on a manifest zone linked to Thelanis. It has been seized by a group of Fae, and the locals want it reclaimed. Or 8. The outpost was built on the foundations of an ancient goblin fortress, and treasures are rumored to lie buried beneath it. Okay, the Lord of Blades. Okay, stalking the Mournland like a spectral juggernaut, the Lord of Blades has emerged from the turmoil of the last war as a symbol that calls to all the Warforged of Corvair. Regardless of what they have become, the Warforged were created to fight and die on the orders of their creator. He looks scary. Well, yeah, he does look pretty scary. I'm pretty sure the implication is that they are Warforged, and they're just from this special group of Warforged that might still subconsciously be fighting the war. Some Warforged accept their history for what it is and look towards the future, but others hold a grudge because of how they were exploited by their creators. Those Warforged make up the followers of the Lord of the Blades. The Lord of the Blades preaches of an apocalyptic future in which the Warforged will destroy or enslave the nations of the flesh and blood. We were made as weapons, the Lord of Blades has declared over and over. Let us be weapons. Let the nations of the land reap what they have sown. Today, Warforged roam Mournland in service to the Lord of Blades, patrolling the devastated terrain and salvaging resources from the ashes of Sire. Most of these dissidents despise creatures of the flesh, and any meeting with outsiders usually ends in blood being spilled. Other disciples of the Lord of the Blades launch attacks on targets across Corvair, destroying Caneth workshops, killing nobles known for their abuse of the Warforged, and seizing shipments of weapons or arcane research to further deplete their enemy. To the flesh and blood citizens of Corvair, the Lord of Blades is a figure of terror and pain, but the Warforged under his sway believe that his rage is fueled by the injustice heaped upon the Warforged after their creation. The Warforged were treated as disposable soldiers, almost slaves during the war, and the post-war arguments over what rights the Warforged should be granted, as if fundamental rights were meant to be bestowed or withheld by political authorities, gave the Warforged themselves no voice, as if they were still the property of their creators. The Lord of Blades' call to action is appealing to many Warforged because it is grounded in legitimate grievances, even if the proposed action is abhorrent. Compared to the total number of Warforged created and deployed in combat during the last war, followers of the Lord of Blades are not especially numerous. His existence and message are well known in the countries bordering the Mournland, especially Breland, but less familiar in the rest of Corvair. Hoping to swell the ranks of his followers, the Lord of Blades has agents spreading his apocalyptic message in every city with significant Warforged populations. The Lord of Blades in the war. The Lord of Blades didn't appear into the world until after the Day of Mourning. Only he knows what his destiny was before then. But many suppositions have been put forth. Some scholars say he was originally a Warforged named Bulwark, the personal bodyguard of King Boronel of Breland. Others believe that he was the last Warforged to emerge from the creation forces as Easton, completed in the last moments before the morning. Perhaps the most outlandish idea is that the Lord of Blades is not a true Warforged. The first Warforged were created by an artificer named Eberron de Caneth, who became furious when the house used his invention to create weapons of war. Based on that knowledge, some believe Eberron transferred his consciousness into a Warforged body so he could personally seek vengeance for the wrongs done to his children. In the years following the War of Blades is a force to be reckoned with. The Warforged are some of the few beings able to thrive in the desolation of the Mournland, so the followers of the Lord of the Blades are building a nation of their own town amidst the devastation. They search out and scour sites that were devastated in the morning to gather lost weapons and magic, all part of their preparations for full-scale war against creatures of the flesh. Oh yes, we're talking about Warforged. We're specifically talking about the Lord of the Blades, which is the sect of Warforged that is beginning to establish a vengeful attack against the people who use Warforged as weaponry during the last war. Thank you very much for tuning in, Adam Z Gamer. The Warforged Ossuary. The ossuary is a former temple crypt or warehouse deep within the moorland that now houses the remains of slain Warforged. It is a place of honor and reflection for the Lord of Blades and his followers. Ossuary features the one depicted in map 4.6 was once a temple, which has been refitted to a resting place for the Lord of Blades followers. Equal parts crypt, monument, vault, and workshop. The ossuary serves many functions for the Warforged who maintain it. Other ossuaries exist in a variety of locations. The basic functions of these places remain the same, regardless of the original purpose of the structure. The Lord of Blades Warforged troops defend these sites with their lives. So, is a square of 5 feet. A sanctuary is a gallery loft, a scrap, a vestry, and a balcony that views downstairs. A reliquary vault, a workshop, a recessed floor, a chapel, a sacristy. Well, what once used to be a temple is just now a burial place for Warforged. Ossuary Adventures, a D6 table. 1. Rescue an artificer who is being forced to graft Warforged components onto the Lord of Blades warriors. 2. Locate a docent carried by a Warforged wizard who has joined up with the Lord of Blades. 3. Capture a Warforged artificer thought to be an advisor to the Lord of the Blades who is touring a series of ossuaries and expecting the remains. 4. Steal a house canon spellbook and workshop log from the day of mourning that is being held in the ossuary's vault. 5. Extract a Warforged spy from the Lord of Blades followers who is close to being discovered. And 6. Retrieve a canon schema supposedly held within the ossuary that tells of the process of transferring a Warforged consciousness from one body to another. Okay. Lord of Blades NPCs, a D6 table. 1. A House Cannith apprentice Warforged becomes obsessed with the Lord of Blades message, disrupting house operations in the hope of becoming a warrior in the Mournland. 2. A Warforged druid devises diseases and poisons that have no effect on Warforged, and starts to unleash them on the general populace. 3. A Warforged ranger relentlessly hunts creatures of the flesh in the wilderness near the Mournland. 4. A Warforged assassin poses as a simple workshop assistant, while exterminating those who speak out against the rights of the Warforged. 5. A mad artificer is trying to reactivate a destroyed Warforged Colossus. Or 6. A band of Warforged attacks a lightning rail, intent on stealing something in one of the cargo carriages. From the voice of Thrain, do they know that the war is over? Against all logic and reason, people in Brayland continue to argue that the Warforged creations of House Cannith, lest we forget, are living people with souls, deserving of the same rights as the rest of us. And yet, while philosophical debates rage and street protests grow heated, Warforged who inhabit the then land of Sire continue to fight as if the war had not ended, launching raids out of the dead grey mist into the neighboring lands, including, of course, Thrain. Proclaiming allegiance to something called the Lord of the Blades, these Warforged can't seem to recognize the people of Thrain as the people, as living people with souls. So it's hard to appreciate why we should treat them in that way. The Lord of Blades is a charismatic leader seeking to incite the Warforged to violence and thereby to take vengeance against their former oppressors. Although low-level characters might not be prepared to face the Lord of Blades himself, they can easily encounter a squad of his followers anywhere on Corvair. While the Lord of Blades and his minions can be a straightforward foe, it's also possible to add more depth to the conflict. Perhaps a squad of Warforged attacks a foundry in Sharn. After repelling the attack, the adventurers realize that the owners are mistreating the Warforged to work the forges. What do? Another way to explore the facets of this issue is to introduce a Warforged supporter of the Lord of Blades who doesn't engage in violence personally, such as a bard who moves among the Warforged of a major city, while speaking about the many abuses leveled against Warforged. Especially if one of them is a Warforged, how would the characters react to this individual? The Lord of Blades can serve as a long-term opponent as he continues to escalate his attacks over the course of the campaign. While he builds up his stronghold in the Mournland, he is also gathering components to construct Eldritch machines and other weapons. What would happen if the Lord of Blades were to discover the power that caused the mourning and unleash that power across Corvair? The Lord of Blades Adventurer's Hooks. A newly awakened Dawson tells its new owner that the Lord of Blades is the only hope for averting an oncoming catastrophe. 2. A military officer hires the characters to retrace the steps of a lost scouting party into the Mournland and to rescue the commander, who is the officer's son. 3. Warforged go missing. Over the course of several weeks, the one resurfaces badly damaged and raving about the Lord of Blades. 4. Characters strike out into a ruin held by the Lord of Blades and recover a lost relic that has resurfaced in the possession of Warforged soldiers. 5. A Warforged accused of murdering several members of their mercenary company claims to have no memory of the night in question. Or 6. The characters are met by a Warforged who delivers a written summons from the Lord of Blades himself. The Lords of Dust. Evil entities spawned at the dawn of time still haunt Eberron. The cities raised by those ancient overlords are now only ashes, but the Lords of Dust still dream of restoring their primordial dominion. These fiends bide their time in an inconceivably long game, sparring with the dragons of Argonison as they manipulate events in order to fulfill the words of draconic prophecy in a way that will bring them victory. Dr. Sarder, thank you very much for following. Dr. Sarder says, Doctor, tell me the news. Thank you very much for following and being a part of our lore reading tonight. Okay, so, let's see. Where was I? Oh, yes. Though the Lords of Dust are mighty enough on their own, they serve greater masters known as the Overlords. Unfathomably powerful fiends, the Overlords were bound at the end of the Age of Demons by the power of the Silver Flame, and an Overlord can be released from this binding only if doing so may be made to fill the draconic prophecy. Every fiend spawned from Kyber owes fealty to one of these Overlords. In many ways, the Lords of Dust are a reflection of the Chamber. Each group is trying to steer the fulfillment of the prophecy in order to serve its own end. The goal of the Lords of Dust is to release the Overlords from their bindings and loose them upon Eberron in a new age of darkness. Despite this unified goal, the Lords of Dust operate as an alliance of like-minded cabals rather than a single monolithic organization. Each cabal serves its particular overlord above all others, and the conditions that release one overlord could actually contradict those that would free another. Accomplished shapeshifters. The Lords of Dust have agents spread across Corvair. Some might wonder why, with all their talents, they haven't tried to conquer the world already. The reason is that they have no interest in ruling this world. They wanted to return to a state of unnatural glory that existed before. Their only interest in humanoids is directing them and their affairs and paths necessary to release their overlords. Aside from that, dealing with mortals is a tedious chore. The Lords of Dust and the war. The Lords of Dust took part in the events of the last war whenever they saw opportunities to further their dark version of the prophecy. It remains difficult to identify what events might have been manipulated by one of these fiends, because their schemes take so long to play out. Far in the future, it might become apparent that a seeming victory for forces of good or a battle averted that spared hundreds from death was ultimately the first step in an overlord's release. For instance, a soldier who was otherwise fated to die in a battle that was avoided goes on to tempt a good-hearted priest into becoming corrupted. In the years since the Thronehold Accords, the Lords of Dust continue on as they ever had, advancing one small step at a time. Okay, a demon ruin. Map 4.7 illustrates what a demon ruin might look like. A demon ruin is an echo of grandeur, swathed in flame and ravaged by time. Despite the rich appointments and impeccable construction evident in the broken remains of a building, the place carries an unmistakable air of anguish and torment. Okay, Demon Ruin Adventures, a D4 table. 1. Make a desperate request for aid from the Lord of Dust, who is by all accounts an enemy of the character's adversary. 2. Escort an innocent who is prophesied to destroy the Lord of Dust to the ruin, and therefore confront the fiend. 3. Carry an artifact to the river of the black lava that runs through the demon ruin, which is the only place where the item can be truly destroyed. Or 4. Gather obsidian shards from the ruin as components for a rare spell. Okay. NPCs, Lord of Dust NPCs, a D6 table. 1. A virtuous paladin is hunting and destroying those who might one day thwart the Lords of Dust. 2. A possessed lady or lord or lady spreads corruption throughout the noble house. 3. A wizard who sought to accelerate their own power by making a dark bargain must now pay the price demanded by their sinister patron. 4. A powerful demon has corrupted the local ruler in the name of its overlord. 5. A succubus or an incubus attempts a mercenary warlord to engage in greater and greater battles. Or 6. One of the character's most trusted allies or servants turns out to be a Rakasha in disguise. Uh, Campaign themes. The Lord of Dust have two basic goals. The first is to encourage activities that strengthen the influence of their overlords. Rak Tulkish embodies war and conflict, and his minions are always eager to cause strife. The servants of Sulkatash entice cruel and selfish people to become warlocks, drawing mystical powers from their mistress. These activities won't release an overlord, but they help to sustain it. To release an overlord, the Lords of Dust must ensure that the prophecy unfolds along a specific path. Often following this path requires specific mortals to do specific deeds. For example, one shred of the prophecy could stipulate that King Bornal has to be killed by one of the characters. The Lords of Dust could easily kill Bornal themselves, but that wouldn't be sufficient to bring about the desired end. Somehow they have to trick the adventurer into doing it. Lords of Dust adventure hooks, a D6 table. 1. A retainer who died recently shows up again as if nothing happened and with no memory of having died, or of the events immediately preceding their supposed demise. 2. Agents of the Chamber show up intent on murdering the characters because their recent actions have unwittingly been at the behest of a Lord of Dust and have twisted a portion of the prophecy. 3. A trusted mentor changes their tune abruptly and begins sending the characters on unusual tasks. 4. Everyone that the characters used to deal with in town suddenly acts as though they've never seen the characters before. 5. Increasingly vicious fiends attack the camp every few nights. 6. Agents of a Lord of Dust apologetically kidnap a character's loved one, politely requesting that the character perform a series of favors in order to secure the hostage's release. The Mournland. Once Sire shone more brightly than any of its sibling nations in the Kingdom of Galifar. It was the center of the kingdom's wealth, a monument to its artistic and arcane achievements, and a site of great centers of learning where preeminent masters of magic, architecture, and artifice taught at the forefront of their craft. It was also the home of House Kenneth and its massive foundries, some of them built on mountains or in mountains, some gracefully spanning canyons, and others erected in vast labyrinths deep underground. Today this region is festering wound across all of Corvair. A wall of mist surrounds the land, twisted into strange and terrible shapes. Sarah was once called the Jewel of Galifar, and now it is the Mournland. The Mourning. No one knows the reason for what happened on 20 Olaroon 994 Whitecade, though it has been battered. Sire stood defiant. Syrian soldiers had recently driven deep into Karnathi territory and were holding their lines against the combined forces of Braylon and Thrain, and then it all suddenly came to an end. Some say that the dead grey mist began in Metrol, initially flowing out of the royal palaces of Irmishard. Others swear that the disaster began in the Canis stronghold of Making. All that is known is that the mist swiftly spread across the kingdom, transforming the lands and the creatures caught within it. Over 1 million people died in the morning, including nearly all the inhabitants of Central Sire. The mist slowed its advance as it spread, and some of those in the borderlands have heard of the disaster in time to flee. Others survived because they were already beyond the borders of Sire. The mist stopped mere feet away from the camps of Syrian soldiers, holding sections of the Braelish front, and though the vast majority of people caught in the morning died, thousands did survive. Most have no clear memory of the event, and there is no explanation for why they were spared. The superstitious say that these people are cursed, that anyone touched by the morning is now an agent of darkness. In the days immediately following the morning, many assumed that the mist would continue to spread. Intense panic slowly turned into curiosity, as it became clear that the border had stabilized. Over the last 4 years, people have ventured into the mist for many reasons. Some sought to plunder the abandoned treasures of the richest nation in Galifar. Others hoped to find lost loved ones, or some explanation for the disaster. Few of these explorers have returned, and those survivors tell tales of a land twisted in unpredictable and inexplicable ways. Sheesh indeed, Devon. From the Corinbird Chronicle, Cataclysm in Sire. A magical catastrophe of unknown origin engulfed the nation of Sire yesterday, bringing a century of war to an explosive climax. Surely when the children of King Jarot began their squabbles over succession 100 years ago, they could have not foreseen the horror that would engulf the home of Queen Mashan. Our reporters are still shifting through accounts of what has happened, but it's clear at this point that the beautiful Sire, the jewel of Galifor's vast holdings, has disappeared behind a churning cloud of dead gray mist. A Mournland environment. The arcane emergencies that cause the day of mourning and that linger in the remains of Sire are mysterious and unpredictable, so they can be the cause of any bizarre magical event you bring to bear in your game. Maps of Sire from before the day of the mourning are of limited use nowadays. The land beyond the gray mist has been twisted and warped, and distances seem to expand and shrink even as one treks across the wastes. As a result, any wisdom survival check or any check using navigator's tools made to negotiate the Mournland is made with disadvantage. The day of mourning redefined the geography of Sire. The cataclysm raised lands, swallowed lakes, and moved whole cities. In some areas, the earth has been torn and gouged as if by some colossal beast. In others, it has become iridescent glass or semi-liquid sludge. Trees in one place turned into crystalline onyx. The flowers in another place began eerily buzzing when touched by a breeze. Nothing in the Mournland is as what it was. The entire land is a scar left by the catastrophe of the morning. The Mist Wall. The borders of the Mournland are defined by a wall of thick gray mist that rises thousands of feet in the air and forms a canopy that hides the ruined realm even from above. The area covered by the mist is a shadowy, muffled region, devoid of life, sunlight, and sound. The wall of mist ranges in thickness from a few hundred feet to as much as 5 miles. Travelers who linger in the mist suffer a growing sense of claustrophobia and despair. It's easy to get lost in the impenetrable fog, and some travelers have wandered in circles, unable to find their way through the mist or back outside it, until their food or water run out, or they blunder into the path of some mutated terror. Patches of mist and less oppressive fog dot the interior of the Mournland, but the worst effects of the mist are confined to the border region. The Glowing Chasm. The northern part of the Mournland is dominated by a great crack in the ground that emits a cold purple light. This supernatural glow emanates from deep within the glowing chasm, so far beneath the surface that its source hasn't been identified. The mutated monsters that roam the Mournland seem drawn to this location, and they spend any significant time near the glowing chasm, mutating further, becoming more twisted and misshapen than before. In the Crimson Water. Before the morning, a spring in the eastern part of Sire fed the rushing river as it traced a short but fertile path south to Kraken Bay. The bed of the rushing river is now as dry and barren as the rest of the Mournland, and the location of the spring is marked by the Crimson Water, a stagnant lake of blood-colored liquid. Is there even a cause given for the mourning? I guess that would be a spoiler. No, there isn't a cause given by the mourning. I suppose that's something that they might have wanted people to determine for themselves back in the day, but in a much broader sense is that they feel like the mourning is a cataclysm that is so vast that if any individual were actually to figure out the cause of it, that it might happen again. So, the shores of the Crimson Water are littered with the remains of animals and travelers that strayed into the Mournland and sought to slake their thirst with a drink from the lake. At the lake bottom is the ruined town of Eastwood Springs, which once served as a resort for the leisured classes of Sire. As of yet, no one has been brave or foolish enough to search for lost treasures in the depths of the Crimson Water. Unusual locations, a D6 table. 1. A pool of glowing water sits in the middle of a ruined abandoned village. Anyone who looks into the water sees brief reflections of long-dead villagers going about their lives in harmony and joy. 2. In the middle of the wreckage of a carnival, there sits a perfectly preserved carousel. If the carousel is ridden, the characters doing so see visions of Sire as it was before the last war. 3. All the trees and plants in the forest have been turned into objects of glossy white stone with blood-red flecks. 4. The battlefield before the characters contains no bodies, only the clothing and weapons of thousands of missing soldiers. 5. The broken bodies of soldiers lie scattered across a battlefield, refusing to decompose. Or 6. The characters of a fallen warforged colossus, which is described later in this section. Well, I suppose they are. Creatures of the Mournland. Many creatures were slain outright by the morning. Others were mutated as the land was transformed. Sometimes the result was an entirely new life form. Any previously unseen monster could appear as a spawn of the morning. Other creatures retain a semblance of their original physiology while taking on some sort of alterations. The monstrous mutation table has options for altering existing monsters to reflect this phenomenon. Most warforged were unaffected by the morning, and the race as a whole seems immune to any of the lingering effects that plague the Mournland. As such, the warforged who follow the Lord of Blades constitute the closest thing to a humanoid society that can be found in the Mournland. Okay. Monstrous mutations, a D6 table. 1. A creature who has grown to an unusual size. You can set its new size and alter its statistics using the guidelines in the Dungeon Master's Guide. 2. The creature has developed magical camouflage, and it gains proficiency in stealth and has a chameleon skin trait. It has advantage on dexterity or stealth checks made to hide. 3. The creature's body has been infused with one kind of energy, acid, cold, fire, or lightning. Its melee attacks deal an extra 1d6 damage of that type, and it has the elemental body trait. 4. The creature has magic resistance. It has advantage on saving throws against spells or other magical effects. Major Deathclaw vibes. Well, maybe Deathclaw got its ideas from this. It's kind of hard to say. 5. The creature has a supernatural ability to heal its wounds. If it has regeneration, it regains hit points at the start of its turn equal to the maximum value of one of its hit dice. If it takes acid or fire damage, this trait doesn't function at the start of the creature's next turn. Or 6. A creature has 2 heads. If it has a bite attack, it can use multi-attack to make 2 bite attacks. It also gains 2 heads trait. It has advantage on wisdom perception checks and saving throws against being blind, charmed, deafened, frightened, stunned, or knocked unconscious. Okay. Magical effects. The catastrophe of the morning altered more than the landscape and the living creatures. The devastation caused localized alterations in the way magic functions. In some places, magic barely functions, or certain magical functions are warped. In other places, spells persist past the instant of their casting and start behaving as their independent living creatures. A common misunderstanding is that the Mournland is that healing spells refuse to work. The fact is that healing spells are impeded within the dead gray mist, and occasionally in other areas, making it harder for someone to cast them effectively. Because so few expeditions make it far past the mist, the inability to heal is widely assumed to be a property of the Mournland as a whole. Environmental effects, a D8 table. 1. Healing spells are impeded here. Any spell that restores hit points does so if it was cast at a level 1 lower than the spell slot expended. 2. A character who casts a spell must make a Constitution saving throw against the character's own spell save DC. On a failed save, the character takes psychic damage equal to the spell's level and gains 1 level of exhaustion. 3. Any medium humanoid that dies in the area reanimates as a zombie as the start of its next turn. The zombie is under the DM's control. 4. The area is affected by a silence spell. 5. Each creature that enters the area is infected by an enlarge or a reduce spell, with an equal chance for each effect. The effect lasts until the creatures leave the area. 6. The pull of gravity is lessened. Creatures can jump twice the normal distance in any direction, and anything equally weighs half of its actual weight. 7. All creatures are linked to every other creature as if by telepathy. Or 8. A creature casts a spell of first level or higher in the area rolls of the Wild Magic Search table in Chapter 3 of the Player's Handbook. Okay. Sites and ruins. The battlefields and the Field of Ruins. Sire was once the site of incessant battles during the last war. From the first extended campaign, the Siege of Eston in 895 YK, to the running battle of the Seirun Road that was cut short when the morning occurred. Battlefields across the Mournland, both ancient and recent, stand like open graves as evidence of the horrors of war. In some places, armies that were fighting on the day of mourning became stone statues anchored in position. Others were crystallized or reduced to ash. On the Field of Ruins, around the Seirun Road and the southwest part of the Mournland, were allied forces of Thrain and Brayland, and outnumbered the Siren army on the day of mourning. The falling soldiers were preserved just as they fell, with no sign of rot or decay. Thousands upon thousands of corpses lie scattered across a field, face down in the dirt or staring lifelessly at the gray sky. Even seasoned bands of treasure hunters are loath to enter the field of ruins. Eston. House Cannith was born in Eston, and the house laborers transformed the city into a place of wonders. Clockwork birds perched and sang in silvery trees, covered in steel bark. Sky coaches carried smiths and mage rights from forge to forge, and an iridescent dome protected the city from storms and harsh winds. On the proving grounds of the Cannith Creation Forges, cadres of newborn Warforged learned the combat skills that would prepare them for active duty. Eston began as a successful mining settlement, extracting iron and ores from the nearby hills. Drawing on these resources, the Cannith artificers in Eston spent decades researching all sorts of artificial creatures, which eventually gave rise to the Warforged. Because of this wonders, Eston is an irresistible attraction for treasure hunters hoping to access the vaults of House Cannith. Reports suggest that it has become a strange and deadly place. It is said that the city is overrun by living spells. In addition to the remnants of damaging spells, there are a stranger phenomenon. Living continual flames that crawl along the streets, clinging to lampposts and fleeing from strangers, and living scrying spells that shift and shimmer, displaying distant scenes on their amorphous skin. Eston was renowned for its clockwork menagerie and its steel gardens, a showcase that chronicles House Cannith's centuries of work, developing constructs and homunculi. These creatures have been twisted by the morning and have become deadly monsters. Stories tell of an enormous Gorgon golem, of razor-winged swarms of silver songbirds, and many other equally strange things. Making and the Glass Plateau. Many people believe that the city of Making was at the epicenter of whatever cause of mourning the cataclysm reshaped the terrain around the city, creating the great highland formation known as the Glass Plateau. The Glass Plateau is mostly smooth and flat, though jagged spikes and spires jut up from the ground in seemingly random places. A central portion of the highland plate is obsidian, and bursts of fiery light can sometimes be seen in its dark depths. Towards the edges of the plateau, the glass becomes lighter in color and more transparent, appearing almost pale and white along the jagged cliffs at the edge. Nothing grows on the plane of glass, and a few creatures haunt its jagged peaks and flat expanse. The ruins of Making still peek through the obsidian flats of the Glass Plateau. Anyone who believes that the morning started here also expect that Making is where the mystery of its origin will be unraveled. A secret Cannith facility is supposed to lie in the city's subterranean depths. Metrol. The city was once the capital of Sire, now it lies empty, seemingly wandering along the Sire River for its people to return. Parts of Metrol have been shattered, their buildings crushed and tumbled by whatever force destroyed the nation. Other portions of the city have escaped with superficial damage, aside from the absence of people and the shroud of mist that hangs over the area. It looks as much as it did before Sire fell. The days of Metrol are quiet, but the nights bring a cacophony of chaos and violence in the streets. At night, misshapen monsters emerge from their lairs to prowl and wail as they hunt each other for food. Okay. The Mournland villains. Few people have reason to spend time anywhere near the Mournland. Among the exceptions are those who seek to plunder the riches of lost sires, such as Icar's salvage, which is described below. The treasure hunters are also the kind of people who make interesting villains, teaming up with adventurers one day and then betraying them the next. Mournland villains, a D6 table. 1. The Lord of Blaine maintains a detention center where experiments are performed on adventurers and scavengers that his forces capture in the Mournland. 2. The leader of a cult devoted to Balashira, the Lord of Eyes, uses Adelkir-made tentacles to tear out the eyes of the victims and attaches them onto members of the cult. 3. A powerful member of House Cannith hopes to find something in the Mournland that will guarantee the ascendancy of her branch of the throne. 4. A Karnathi Bone Knight wants to raise up an undead army from the corpses in the Mournland. 5. A Rakshasa works to see a fiendish overlord trapped in a whirlwind of stone and sand somewhere in the Mournland. Or 6. A servant of the Lords of Dust maintains an extensive collection of severed heads and continues to draw on the knowledge that is found in their brains. Adventurers and Encounters, a D6 table. 1. There's a gatekeeper druid that wants a rock sample from the glass plateau. 2. A mage rite from House Cannith wants the party to escort him to a Warforged Colossus. The mage rite wants to retrieve the docent network from the Colossus before an unscrupulous House Fairland operative decides to do the same. 3. On her deathbed, the visionary artist who designed the lightning rail station in Metro reveals that she had a treasure map within the lamp in her old office. 4. A wealthy eccentric asks the party to go to the Mournland and retrieve his most prized possession, a letter from a lover, a mechanical caterpillar, or anything else that you devise, from his mansion. 5. A young Syrian paladin is morose because she was away from Sire on a mission from the day of mourning when the day of mourning occurred, and she never got to say goodbye to her family. She longs to retrieve her father's sword. And 6. An elderly knight is strapping on his armor one last time so he can ride into the Mournland and die on the battlefield where his companions perished and where I should have perished. Encounters and trinkets, a D6 table. 1. The party meets flickering images of their future selves who are trying desperately to communicate, but their message is garbled. 2. The party encounters a revenant who is murdered by House Cannith assassins after she learned too much about the House's secret research. The characters can appease her by promising to help her get revenge. 3. A tiny kitten mews from inside of the hollow log. Within a few hours after it being freed, it grows into an adult displacer beast. 4. The apparition of a parent searches for their lost child. As soon as the two are reunited, the parent and the spirit child both vanish. A kitty. That's actually a displacer beast, so it never really was a kitty. 5. The mist congeals into the form of a long-lost love of one of the adventurers. The mist apparition wants the character to stay here forever. Or 6. The characters come across a skull of a buried Warforged Colossus. The Mournland Trinkets. D10 table. 1. The favorite childhood toy of one of the adventurers floating in midair. 2. A tin whistle that makes beautiful colors and patterns magically appear when it's played. 3. A toy lightning rail car. 4. A glass eye. 5. A silver lapel pin of a finely detailed Gorgon's head with ruby eyes. 6. A monocle that can be used as a telescope. 7. A 6-inch mechanical marmoset in need of minor repairs. 8. A small medallion made of silver depicting a tower with an eye at the top of it and other smaller eyes embedded in the side. 9. A cloak pin made of iron in the shape of the two hammers joined by a semicircular haft. Or 10. A wooden dinosaur toy that has movable legs. Yeah. A big kitty. A big kitty that turned out to be a displacement beast, so etc. The Warforged Colossus. Many weeks before the day of mourning, House Cannith unleashes mightiest creation, the Warforged Colossi. Hundreds of feet tall, these gargantuan warriors thundered across Sire, crushing everything in their path and leaving ruin in their wake. Meant to end the war decisively, these arcane war machines could pulverize soldiers beneath their feet and incinerate entire legions with beams of red light radiating from their mouths. But as the Colossi were beginning to turn the lands outside Sire, the morning came and the Colossi perished. Now their remains lie, like mountains in the moorland, filled with secrets and waiting to be explored. History of the Colossi. House Cannith spent much of the war working on various kinds of constructs that could serve as soldiers, siege engines, or other weapons of war. Their earliest efforts, which lumbered into Syrian battlefields in the late 1930s, were barely more than golems with limited amounts of sentience, difficult to command in the field. The Warforged Titans were developed over the next 20 years, and the modern Warforged, often perceived as the pinnacle of Cannith engineering, first saw battle in 965. Successful as the Warforged were, though, House Cannith never lost interest in building a better Titan. Sire didn't lose its desire for deadly weapons that could give it an edge over its enemies, and tremendous amounts of gold flowed from Sire's coffers into the vaults of House Cannith as research and development continued, working towards a new kind of Warforged that could bring an end to the war once and for all, and establish Sire's martial supremacy for years to come. With Sire's immense wealth fueling its effort, House Cannith called upon the ingenuity of its best artificers and mage rites Construction began on enormous new creation foundries, hundreds of feet tall, carved into the sides of mountains, or secretly nestled within remote canyons. The project succeeded beyond Sire's wildest dreams. When the original Warforged Colossus took its first thunderous footsteps, it was met with a reaction of equal parts awe and horror, and was almost immediately sent north towards Metrol, where armies from Karnath were menacing the Syrian capital. Operating in Colossus. A Warforged Colossus is part Warforged and part vehicle, and stands between 200 and 300 feet tall. For optimal performance, a Colossus required an active crew, including a captain with the Mark of Waking, a weapons officer with the Mark of Storm, and a helmsman with the Mark of Passage. When absolutely necessary, though, the Colossus could direct itself, but at diminished power. A Colossus also carried a sizable contingent of elite troops, who could ride in safety within the Colossus while it crushed through enemy lines or smashed through a wall, then pour out through hatches once the Colossus was in position. The Colossus Power Core, the power source of a Colossus, is a Kyber dragon shard of unusually large size, cut into a specific pattern that allows the dragon shard to contain raw material energy without exploding. A single power core is about the size of a wine barrel, hooked up to an elaborate harness that distributes power throughout the Colossus. So, finding a Colossus. When adventurers discover a Colossus, it might be in any state. Some have fallen or collapsed or become overgrown with vegetation to a point where it could be mistaken for a small hill. One was engulfed when the rock was under its feet turned to liquid and swallowed it up, encasing it in a stone prison when the rock hardened. Some are buried except for the head or a hand, which serves as a clear indicator that something lies underneath. Adventurers might even stumble upon a reality the world isn't ready to face, which is an operational Colossus. Map 4.8 shows the following Colossus. The mostly hollow interior of a Colossus is large enough for the crew and the soldiers to travel in safety. This area features tunnels, ladders, hallways, and crawlways, control rooms, storage rooms, arbalest turrets, and observation deck. A Colossus usually has multiple hatches to allow entrance and egress, on the legs, on the back, in the chest, in the mouth, on the back of the head, and so on. But entering the remains of a Warforged Colossus is not a task to be taken lightly, since the Mornland can have bizarre effects on the Colossus's power core and weaponry, as well as its mind. So this is the map of a fallen Colossus. Wait, mechs? Yep, mechs. Gigantic robot warforged that might have won the war for the Syrians if the disaster didn't occur. Now they're just lying there, and they probably serve to be probably one of the more interesting dungeon types. All right. Holy Lord. The Order of the Emerald Claw, what arose as an order of militant knights between the nation of Karnath, fell into disgrace and became a shattered remnant. The Order of the Emerald Claw now operates as a collection of cells of fantastical warriors, necromancers, and spies. On the surface, its members seem to be driven by Karnathi patriotism, and they purport to be adherents of the blood of Vol. The most cursory investigation reveals that claim to be a facade. The truth behind the Emerald Claw is that they serve the Lich Lady Ilmaro, and in her name they carry out acts of destruction, murder, and necromantic terrorism. They have been linked to the theft of powerful items imbued with necromancy magic and often employ vicious undead minions that make even other Karns uncomfortable. Most worshippers of the blood of Vol are quick to point out that they don't accept the Order's claim to membership in their faith, and those true worshippers vehemently reject the Emerald Claw's violent fanaticism. During the last war, Karnath was forced to embrace the practice of necromancy in order to bolster the ranks of his army. At the same time, a number of chivalric orders were founded by devoted worshippers of the blood of Vol. These groups included necromancers and bow knights that were trained to raise and command the undead troops that were used during the war. The Order of the Emerald Claw was one of the most infamous of these groups, renowned for its fighting skills but often sanctioned for its brutal treatment of enemy soldiers. The Emerald Claw were also accused of slaughtering civilians so that they could be raised as skeletons or zombies, behavior that was strictly forbidden by the Karnath commanders. When King Caius III came to power near the end of the war, he turned against the blood of Vol. The orders were disbanded, and many members of the Emerald Claw were condemned as war criminals. While the other orders compiled with the king's edict, many knights of the Emerald Claw refused to surrender. The order fragmented as its original members were scattered, but a number of these rebellious knights started their own cells, rallying all who wanted to see Karnath achieve its rightful glory. The order experienced a surge in membership following the Treaty of Thronehold because many Karns thought that Caius III had betrayed their nation by embracing peace. Okay. Library vaults kept by the Order of the Emerald Claw. They can be found in a variety of locations. Some of them are crypts, dungeons secreted away underground, while others are hidden in plain sight inside of a home or a business. Whatever its specific location, a vault is always equipped with its defensive features, some of which remain active even after the outer door has been breached. Library Vault Adventures, a D6 table. 1. Destroy a scroll containing an incantation that allows even non-spellcasters to animate the dead. 2. Steal the journal of a powerful necromancer that's being held in the vault's collection. 3. Trade a powerful dark magic weapon in return for the rescue of important hostages taken by the Order. 4. Steal a suit of armor that contains the soul of a hero slain during the last war. 5. Search the collection for information on the Queen of the Dead, or Lady Ilmaro as she is known. Or 6. Infiltrate the vault to get close to a new Emerald Claw recruit, then convince them to come to their senses and return to their family. Order of the Emerald Claw NPCs, a D6 table. 1. Though mortal, this fanatical warrior drinks the blood of those he slays in battle. 2. A cleric tries to convince her enemies to embrace the Order, promising eternal life through undeath. 3. A noble with sympathies towards the Order hides a cell's library vault within the grounds of their estate. 4. A suave vampire would rather charm his enemies than crush them in battle. 5. An artificer is obsessed with infusing necromantic curses into their construct creations. Or 6. A changeling necromancer often poses as a vampire or mummy, even though it is still alive. Emerald Claw Adventure Hooks, a D8 table. 1. What at first appears to be a renegade and a group of Ondarian soldiers turn out to be undead under their Order's control. 2. The Order strikes at a small keep, demanding the inhabitants surrender a particular volume from their library. 3. Investigating strange lights and sounds emanating from a crypt in the dead of the night reveals the Emerald Claw experimenting on the corpses within. 4. The Emerald Claw violates graves near a small village, animating the corpses into undead laborers to help build an eldritch machine. 5. The Emerald Claw claims a village's town hall for its own use, and any who come near are attacked. The sounds of torture ring out from within the building. 6. Investigating disappearances among an elf community reveals that the Order of the Emerald Claw has been attempting to inscribe something like a dragon mark in their skin, then reanimating failed experiments as zombies. 7. While searching for a magic item in the Decani ruins across southern Corvair, the characters discover that Emerald Claw agents are looking for the same thing and seem to have access to information that the adventurers lack. Or 8. A large forge of Emerald Claw Knights offers the characters a choice: join the Order or submit themselves to death and an eternity of servitude from beyond the grave. Okay. Planes of Existence. Eberron is part of the Great Wheel of the Multiverse, as described in the Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. At the same time, it's fundamentally apart from the rest of the Great Wheel, sealed off from other planes, even while it is encircled by its own wheeling cosmology. Eberron's unique station in the multiverse is an important aspect of the world. Its planes are profound and shifting influences on the material plane, and it is sheltered from the influences and machinations of gods and other powers elsewhere on the Great Wheel. And so this is the cosmology of Eberron. So the material and ethereal plane of Eberron, which is probably what is most consumed by the people who live here, is here in the center. And every single connecting outworld is seen on just the outer areas around here, surrounded in circles like an atom. So, no other planets have been discovered within Eberron's material plane. The other underworld of Kyber contains hosts of demiplanes, tiny pockets of altered reality. As such, venturing beneath the surface of Eberron can lead you to a network of caverns and passages. Or an Underdark, if you prefer. Or if you find the right passage, it can take you to fantastic and deadly places inhabited by fiends, aberrations, and other children of Kyber. The different planes of Eberron. So, let me see. The material plane is enfolded by 13 planes of existence. Many of these aspects of both outer planes and inner planes, all of them overlap with Eberron in some way, and they influence and are influenced by the material plane. The intensity of this influence waxes and wanes. Scholars often depict the planes as orbits of Eberron, sometimes coming close, other times far away. And though this manner of expression is merely a metaphor for their shifting influence, when another plane's influence on the material plane is especially strong, the plane is said to be coterminous. Coterminous. I have to look that one in. Let's see. Coterminous. Coterminous. Oh, okay. Having the same or coincident boundaries. Okay. That's what it means. Manifest zones. At certain places in the material plane, the barriers between the worlds are thin, and some characteristics of other planes can bleed in through the material world. These places are called manifest zones, and the nature of each one is strongly shaped by the plane it connects to. Coterminous. Yeah, that's precisely what it means. The city of Sharn is located in the manifest zone linked to Serana that keeps its towers reaching towards the sky and aids in the power of flight. Ghosts might linger in the manifest zone associated with Lore, while a manifest zone tied to Lamania might have wild vegetation and enhanced druidic magic. A manifest zone might include a portal that allows free passage from either plane to the other. The descriptions of other planes in this section offer some other possible effects. Yeah, let's just go ahead to go to the table. Okay. Divani Manifest Zone features a D4 table. 1. People who live in the Manifest Zone are inclined to follow duly enacted regulations without question, regardless of moral implications. 2. Creatures cannot tell deliberate lies within the area. 3. Flora and fauna are preternaturally orderly and homogeneous. Trees here grow in neat rows without needing to be tended. Rocks are situated in geometric patterns, and identical cattle graze in unison. 4. A contingent of Modrons is methodically deconstructing and reorganizing the zone, heedless of their effect on other inhabitants. So, Dalcor, the region of dreams. Mortal creatures come into contact with Dalcor when they dream. The outer fringes of the plane are shaped by memories and experiences of dreamers. The dark core at the heart of the plane is shaped by the nightmare known as the Dreaming Dark. The primary inhabitants of Dalcor are the Korai, enigmatic master manipulators that can inhabit the dreams of others. And then there is Lore, the realm of the dead. When a mortal soul dies, it is drawn to Lore, a place defined by despair and apathy. Over time, memories are leached out of these trapped spirits until only husks remain. Although this seems a bleak fate, most religions maintain that Lore is not the end of a soul's journey. It is a gateway to whatever lies beyond. They assert that what appears to be disillusion is the natural process of a soul moving from a higher plane of existence that mortals can never realize. Joining with the Sarvans, merging with the Silver Flame, or simply rejoining the cycle of life in a new form, that claim notwithstanding, Lore is a gloomy plane filled with the lingering traces of the dead. Lore Manifest Zone features a D4 table. 1. Bodies buried here reanimate in 1d4 days, possessed by restless spirits. These spirits might be malevolent or benign. 2. Any necromancy spell of the first level or higher cast within the zone is treated as if it is cast at a level 1 higher than the spell slot when it was expanded. 3. Spells and abilities that raise the dead have a 50% chance to bring back 1d4 angry spirits as well. These might be banshees, ghosts, shadows, specters, wraiths, or any other incorporeal form of undead. 4. In order to cast a spell of first level or higher in the zone, the caster must succeed on a constitution check with a DC equal to 10 plus the level of spell. On a failed check, the spell is not cast and the spell slot is not expended, but the action is lost. Fernia, the Sea of Fire. This plane encompasses the raw elemental power of fire and its versatility. Flame used as a weapon, as a force that holds darkness, or as a destroyer, and a force for change. Fernia is home to all manner of fire elementals, and to celestials and fiends that embrace the same ideals. Fernia manifests own features. 1. Spells that deal fire damage are empowered here. Such a spell as a first level or half cast within the zone deals fire damage as if it were a cast at a level 1 or higher. 2. Weapons and armor within unusual abilities can be forged here, though their enchantments are not always stable. 3. The area is dotted with pools of molten earth and fissures of scalding water, from which mephitis and elementals emerge with regularity. Or 4. Motes of continual flame are spontaneously generated in this region, typically attached to some vegetation or minerals from the area. These flames persist even if they are removed from the region. Irian, the eternal dawn, plane of light and hope, the wellspring of positive energy, and the foundation of light, life, and love. Light, life, and love. The regions of Irian reflect the idea of beginnings and resurgent life, fertile lands untouched by any tool, guttering crystal forests, and thriving homesteads and communities. Positive energy flows into Eberron from Irian, and the denizens of Irian believe the simple fact that their existence helps the mortals of the material plane. The celestials of Irian are also likely to respond to planar ally and similar spells. I'm probably going to start skipping the D4 tables because this is going to take a long time if I read them all. Alright, so Kithri, the churning chaos, the plane of chaos and change. Kithri is in a realm in constant flux. The elements collide in fantastic explosions of unbridled power. Motes of earth careen erratically through space as gravity constantly shifts and a riot of colors blazes through the ever-shifting sky. Still stoic, Gizera monks exert their will over the elements, crafting monasteries on islands of earth amidst the chaos. Several varieties of Slati dwell here as well, exulting in the endless turmoil. Lamania, the twilight forest, though it is referred to as a forest, Lamania contains every possible natural environment. It can be home to great beasts, lycanthropes, and other beings that reflect the power of nature. The splendor of nature in this place is intoxicating to druids. Animals born here are paragons to their species, infused with primal power that put even the finest specimens of House Fidelis to shame. Maybar, the endless night. Maybar is the darkness that promises to swallow even the brightest day. The hungry shadow that yearns to consume light and life. It is the plane of entropy, hunger, and loss, slowly sucking the life from the multiverse. It is a source of negative energy in Eberron. Most undead are animated by the power of Maybar, and the life that they drain from mortals flows into the endless night. Risia, the plane of ice. The counterpoint to Fernia, Risia embodies winter's chill and the stoic consistency of the glacier. Across Risia's icy expanse, blizzards ceaselessly howl over floes of thick blue ice, and frost giants carve giant fortresses from glaciated mountains. Shavarath, the battleground. Shavarath is the plane of war ravaged by a conflict that will never end. Since the dawn of time, armies of fiends and celestials have fought one another in Shavarath. Their eternal battles are a microcosm of the struggle between good and evil that rages across all of reality. New arrivals are subject to a forced conscription when encountered. If they aren't summarily dispatched among the constant strife, windstorms of blades scour the landscape capable of cutting the unprepared to ribbons. For all of its dangers, Shavarath holds weapons of legend and a wealth of knowledge on the art of war. Serenia, the azure sky. Crystal spires float in a perfect blue sky. Farms and serene communities stretch across clouds. Siriana is a plane of peace and all that flourishes within times of peace. This includes commerce. The immeasurable market of Serenia draws merchants and travelers from all across different parts of reality. Siriana is home to a host of angels that devote their immortal lives to serene contemplation. Each angel seeks to achieve mastery of one pure concept, such as holding all the knowledge on the subject, or ceaselessly abiding by the tenets of a virtue. An angel of dreams isn't a quarry, but it does understand dreams. It can explain and interpret them, and it can shape them if it chooses. Likewise, an angel of war isn't constantly embroiled in battle, but the celestials of Shavarath are, Instead, it seeks perfection in the art and theories of war. Angels of Siriana can sometimes be useful sources of information for adventurers, and sometimes travel to Eberron in order to observe mortals. Thelanis, the Fairy Court. Thelanis is the home of the Fae, in a realm where the narrative and metaphor shape the nature of its reality. Its many dominions are governed by the Archfey. The denizens of each realm reflect the nature and the story of their lord. For instance, the realm of the Prince of Frost is trapped in an endless winter, and pale Eladrin led packs of winter wolves in their hunts. It is not the same environment as on Risia, because the Prince's realm isn't an embodiment of the idea of cold. Rather, it is a domain frozen by its prince's broken heart. If the prince's story were changed, the realm might change with it. Time and space are both malleable in the fairy court, and a mortal who wanders into Thelanis may never return, or might leave after a few days to discover that weeks, months, or years have passed back home. Zoriet, the realm of madness. Zoriet's bizarre geometry and unspeakable inhabitants seem like the product of an insane person's nightmare. In this utterly alien environment, beings whose appearance can shatter a person's sanity live in cities crafted from gargantuan fleshy tumors. Seas of protoplasm and the shade of purple that hurts the eyes lap against the shores of Chitin. Some can look upon Zoriat and see it as a place of revelations, while most mortals who come too close to Zoriat fall prey to madness. Zoriat is the source of many aberrations, including the terrifying Delkier. Okay. Eberron and the multiverse. Okay, well, finally, Brainy gets to get his his 2 bits from this book. It is theoretically possible to travel between Eberron and other worlds in the multiverse by means of the deep ethereal or various spells designed for planar travel, but the cosmology of Eberron is specifically designed to prevent such travel, to keep the world hidden away from the meddling of gods, celestials, and fiends from beyond. The 3 progenitor worms work together to form Eberron and its planes in a new cosmic system in the depths of the ethereal plane. They recreated the elves, orcs, dragons, and other races found throughout the multiverse, and placed them in their new world, but allowed them to develop beyond the reach of Grumish, Coralon, Lolth, and other influences of good and ill. In your campaign, you might decide that the barrier formed by the Ring of Cerberus is intact, and contact between Eberron and the worlds and planes beyond its cosmology is impossible. This is the default assumption of this book. On the other hand, you might want to incorporate elements from other realms. Perhaps you want to use a published adventure that involves Tiamat or the forces of the Abyss meddling in the affairs of this world. In that case, it could be the protection offered by the Ring of Cerberus has begun to fail. You might link the weakening of Cerberus to the Morning. Perhaps whatever magical or catastrophe caused the Morning also disrupted the Ring of Cerberus, or perhaps the disruption of the Ring of Cerberus actually caused the Morning. In the contact between Eberron and its wider multiverse is recent and limited, consider the implication for everyone involved. In the Great Wheel, Asmodeus is an ancient threat, with well-established cults, lines of tieflings, and a long history of meddling that sages can uncover in dusty old tomes hidden in remote libraries. But if Asmodeus has only just discovered Eberron and begun to influence it for the first time, there is no lore about him to be discovered on Eberron. He has no power base and needs to recruit new followers. Unusual alliances might form against him as Celestial and Fiends join forces to expel this hostile outsider. Gods, Celestials, and Fiends, the people of Eberron believe that their gods are omnipresent, not bound to a single coherent form, but present in all places. If you revere the Silver Flame, its power is always with them. The sovereign Onotar guides the hand of every smith who knows to listen to his voice. And Dolora and Doldorn are active on the battlefield, guiding every soldier. This outlook means that religion is driven by faith as opposed to the concrete actions of deities. The faithful believe that their triumphs reflect the assistance of divine influence. They don't expect a god to physically show up and solve their problems. Coatls. Coatls are a celestial race born from Sarbarius at the dawn of time. Along with dragons, they battle the fiendish outlords of Corvair and Sarlona. Ultimately, the Quaddles sacrificed most of their number and combined their souls to form a prison to hold all the overlords. Scholars have theorized that their combined souls eventually became the force that is worshipped by the Church of the Silver Flame. The Church is ambivalent on the topic, preaching that regardless of how the flame was first kindled, there is a place within the flame for all noble souls. The few Quaddles that remain on Eberron are devoted servants of the light. They are most often found guarding the prison of the ancient fiendish overlords, and individuals sometimes act directly to aid adventurers who fight the forces of darkness. Fiends. The mightiest of the fiends, born from Kyber, are creatures of immense power known as the Overlords. Dozens of the Overlords were imprisoned by the Silver Flame at the dawn of time. Two of them, Rek Tulkish and Sol Katish, were detailed in Chapter 6. Another, Belshalor, the Shadow and the Flame, is bound within the Silver Flame itself, in the great cathedral to the Flamekeep in Thrain. You can adapt other evil gods or archfiends from an Eberron campaign by recasting them as the Overlords. Tiamat could possibly be an Overlord embodying the pride and potential for good or evil within dragons, and Loth could be an Overlord who preys on the elves, and Asmodeus, the insidious maker of profane bargains. Night Hags. Night Hags have been around since the Age of Demons, where they've often served as ambassadors and carried messages between the fiends and the dragons. Today, they remain impartial mediators, and adventurers who are about to deal with outsides or other planes of existence might want to seek the advice of a Night Hag, although one can be quite difficult to find. Rakashas. As the primary agents of the fiendish overlords, Rakashas once dominated Corvair and Sarlona when the overlords were defeated in the first age of the world by the combined might of the dragons and the Quaddles. The Rakashas largely disappeared into Kyber as well. The Lords of Dust are made up mostly of Rakashas scheming in the shadows, many trying to flee their imprisoned overlords, others looking for a way to claim their master's power for their own. Okay, and then this is a section on travel. So once again, we had a section for Chapter 2, which, discusses all these things. Elemental vessels, Lysander airships, galleons, lightning rails, mysterious passengers, and the Gold Dragon Inns. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to skip that part. Okay, so this is the last section of Chapter 4, and this is about building Eberron adventures in Sharn. And so, yeah, we're specifically focused on Sharn, which we talked about a couple episodes ago as the floating city that has upper, middle, and lower castes, and different civilizations of people living in every section. Alright. Chapter 3 describes the city of Sharn in detail. The following sections focus on adventures that can happen there. These adventures can unfold among the tallest towers of Skyway in the deepest depths of the Cogs, or anywhere in between. At the end of this chapter is an introductory adventure set in Sharn, which we're not going to read. Sharn is a grim place that makes good people bad and bad people worse. In its mean streets, gritty detectives contend with corrupt law officers while trying to foil the efforts of merciless gangs and monstrous thugs. In the highest towers, wealthy barons from the Dragonmark houses make shady deals with crime bosses, each of them making profits by exploiting both the ordinary folk and the well-heeled upper crust alike. Corruption can be found among the ranks of government, the Watch, the temples, and other large businesses. This atmosphere makes Sharn a perfect location for adventures inspired by the noir genre. Life in the city, a D6 table. 1. A homicidal changeling has killed 2 members of different Dragonmark houses and doesn't plan to stop until one heir from each of the Dragonmark houses is dead. 2. A jeweled statuette has fallen into the hands of House Tarkanan, and a powerful member of the Arum will stop at nothing to attain it. The statuette's real worth lies in the secret plans hidden inside it. It's the Maltese Falcon, basically. 3. A Karnathi undead soldier, troubled by sporadic memories of his former life, is trying to locate his wife and family who have fled Karnath and now live somewhere in the lower districts of Sharn. Yeah, getting very noir. 4. A shifter shopkeeper in Lower North Edge is being harassed by ruffians who believe that she and her family are lycanthropes. 5. A Dragonmark baron is found dead in her upper central mansion, seemingly a victim of some sort of ritual slaying. Outside help is needed to solve this delicate matter. Or 6. A radiant idol has formed a cult that attracts professors and staff of Morgrave University, promising them knowledge beyond imagining in exchange for their worship. Home Sweet Home. If you're creating a campaign based in Sharn, it's a good idea to establish a location that serves as a home base for the adventurers. You can use the home base table as a source of inspiration, or you can develop a unique location. The Streets of Sharn. The street events table, starting with Lower Sharn. Street events are filled with random events the characters can witness while they wander around Sharn. You can expand onto an entry to make it the start encounter of adventure, though not every event leads to draw the characters into a longer story. Each table is meant to be used on a different level of Sharn, in the lower wards, the middle wards, the upper wards. Once again, we know how this works because we read it in Chapter 3. You can choose results from the tables or randomly determine what happens, and you can modify results as you please, tailoring the events of a event to a particular fit for a better district. The events in these tables are phrased so they can be read aloud or summarized to players. Okay, add home base, your home base, a D12 table. 1. The Drunken Dragon, Clifftop Upper Dora, a tavern frequented by members of the Clifftop Adventure Guild. It has a wide selection of spirits, and its walls are covered with adventuring trophies. The Anvil, Calistan Lower Dora, one of the first Galandra halls in Sharn. Its glory days are long past, but the young innkeeper, Arana del Galanda, is determined to keep it alive. 3. The Dazina Museum of Antiquities. Attached to the library of Morgrave University, the museum has a remarkable collection of relics, but it is always looking for more. The curator is an elf named Eberron Senared. 4. Cloud Flame Keep, High Hope, Middle North Edge, a garrison church dedicated to the Silver Flame. Once it supported a troop of Templars, but is largely abandoned during the war, and now maintains a minimal staff. 5. The Red Hammer in Blackbones and the Cogs caters to a Warforged. It is run by 2 Warforged, the Envoy Blue and a Juggernaut named Crucible. This place is a haven for Warforged. Other humanoids are allowed inside if their Warforged allies vouch for them. 5. The Gold Dragon Inn, operated by House Galandra and located in almost every part of Shan, described earlier in the chapter. 7. The District of the Fallen was abandoned after a floating tower fell on it. The adventurers might have taken over an old temple or a tavern on the edge of the district. 8. An abandoned bell tower, which could be anywhere in the city. The spells that drove the massive mechanism failed long ago. 9. An abandoned library damaged during the war or thought to be cursed or haunted. 10. The Shudder Tavern, which is a failed business tied to the family of one of the adventurers. 11. If one of the adventurers is a noble, the character's base of operations is the basement of the family estate or a tower apartment owned by a dotty old aunt. Or 12. Ramshackle Sky Coach is tethered to a condemned tower on the end of the city. So, you guys live inside of a condemned sky coach that is just chained to the city. Oh boy, a D100 table. Lower Sharn Street events. On a 1 or 2, a Minotaur holding a large piece of wood can serve as a maul, approaches you and politely asks if you have copper to spare. 3 to 4, down a nearby alleyway, a dwarf punches a goblin in the stomach, then walks away laughing. 5 to 8, a thin human child has been following you but never gets too close. She keeps coughing, and you can see red marks on her neck. That might be an aberrant dragon mark. This is going to, I'm going to skip a lot of this because this is all really just incidental stuff that might happen in the city. I mean, if you want to use that in order to fuel the beginning of your adventure, then nothing is going to keep you from it, but it's an awful long roll chart to try to read all the way through. And I believe that there's more than one, too, so that would be like 2 reading, a 100 chart and then 1 D12 chart. That's precisely what I'm avoiding here. Sharn Heights. Sharn Heights are intersections of bridges and platforms in Sharn that make a perfect place for a meeting, theft, or an assassination. The crisscrossing paths of Sharn Heights allow criminals to come and go in different directions, looking like normal passers-by as they trade information, cut purses, or throw people to their dooms. Sharn location contains intersections of bridges and platforms. Each bridge is 20 feet higher than average and the one immediately below it. There's a residential towers on these sides, market stalls, a trinket stores, a suspended garden, and these three intersecting areas are effectively where all of the adventure hooks are most likely to happen. Sharn Heights Adventure is a D4 table. One poses a House Tarkin operative to capture a wanted criminal within a barren dragon mark. The criminal is waiting on a bridge for his House Tarkin escort to arrive. 2. Obtain a satchel of evidence obtained by a goblin who has infiltrated Dask. The goblin, who is working with the Boromir clan or the Sharn Watch to take down key Dask operatives, is waiting on a bridge. 3. Break into a building connected to Sharn Heights to steal something valuable. Or 4. Stop a crooked Sharn Watch official who is trying to reach a sky coach and flee the city to escape arrest. Crime in Sharn. Crime is a part of everyday life in Sharn, and just like in any other city, sometimes such acts are carried out by people who have no ties to organized crime. An upstanding citizen could be driven to murder by passion. A refugee could become a cut purse out of desperation. The rowdy British Brailish veterans who call themselves the Brokerage Brawlers didn't think of themselves as criminals, and they have no connection to any larger organization. Any professional criminal in Sharn, however, is likely to be affiliated with one of 4 organizations. The Boromir clan is the most entrenched and widespread of the 4, and has dominated the businesses and crime in Sharn for centuries. The group called Dask is on the rise, rapidly challenging the Boromars. The Tyrants and the House Tarkanan are smaller organizations with more specialized areas of operation. These groups are summarized in the criminal organizations of Sharn and described in the later sections that follow. Each of these organizations has a core of operatives and enterprises under direct control of its leaders, but it also has a network of secondary relationships. For example, the Little Fingers are a group of pickpockets and cut purses that work in the bazaar of Middle Dora. They aren't directly tied to the Boromar family, but the master of the gang pays a tithe to the Boromars, and if the Boromars send word to them that certain targets are to be avoided, the Little Fingers often do so. In return, the Boromars assure that the Sharn Watch in Middle Dora largely leaves the Fingers alone. So although the Boromar clan found itself has a few hundred members, it has interaction with dozens of criminals throughout the city. Let me see. So this is narcotics in Sharn. From the owners of incense-clouded dens to fast-talking street dealers, many entrepreneurs, legitimate and otherwise, make a profitable business selling narcotics in Sharn. The following drugs are just 2 of the most notorious substances available in the City of Towers and beyond. Dragon's Blood. Introduced to Sharn by Dask, Dragon's Blood is a potent and highly addictive stimulant. In addition to inducing euphoria, enhanced spellcasting ability, or even temporarily imbues a user with the ability to cast its sorcerer's spells. The drug's effects are potentially dangerous and always unpredictable. This isn't something a player character should want to use. Adventurers are more likely to interfere with Dask smugglers or deal with an addict that accidentally casts a fireball in a crowded street. Dream Lily. A psychoactive liquid that smells and tastes like your favorite beverage. The essence of Dream Lily is a Sarlonian opiate, first imported to help manage pain during the last war. It is now the most commonly abused substance in Sharn. Though Dream Lily isn't illegal if used for medicinal purposes, it's heavily taxed, and thus most Dream Lily is smuggled in and sold on the black market. Dream Lily dens can be found across the lower wards. Consuming Dream Lily causes disorienting euphoria and brings about remarkable resistance to pain. A creature under the effects of Dream Lily is considered poisoned for 1 hour. While poisoned, the creature is immune to fear, and the first time it drops to 0 hit points without being killed outright, it drops to 1 hit point instead. A dose of Dream Lily costs around 1 gold point, or up to 10 times that if purchased through legal channels. There are many varieties of drug, and the duration of the price might vary accordingly. Okay, criminal organizations in Sharn, the Boromir clan, the Dask, the House Tarkanan, and the Tyrants. We already went over those. Street gangs, the Broken Mirror, Korvar half-elves who often target elves with acts of violence, the Broken Bridge Brawler, Brailish veterans who antagonize Sirens and former soldiers from other nations. The Eyes, collections of odd individuals who paint symbolic eyes in their clothing and armor and claim to see things other things cannot. I think we talked about them a little bit in earlier chapters. that is really just kind of a ruse. That it says that they serve a hidden beholder. The five vases, changeling pickpockets who work Middle Memphis. The gremlins, gnomes, and halflings who specialize in illusion magic. The little fingers, we had already talked about them. The Syrian veterans who present themselves as a vigilante militia. The Moot, the bugbears in Lower Dura who have been quote-unquote protecting Melian's gate for decades. The quiet folk, goblins who live in the sewers below, using stealth and knowledge of the sewers to pull off their thievery. And the red jackals, primarily shifters and half-orcs, who live in the sewers below Memphis and clash with anyone who invades their territory. The Boromar clan, the most powerful criminal organization in Sharn, started as a family of halfling immigrants from the Talenta Plains, operating out of its headquarters and key holdings in the Little Plains district of Middle Memphis. The Boromar clan controls gambling, smuggling, and theft in Sharn. Most of the city's burglars, pickpockets, and fences either work with or pay ties to the organization. The Boromar clan's of extortion, bribery, or blackmail extends from Lower Dora to Skyway. The Boromar's existence extends beyond criminal enterprises into many legitimate circles of power. Lyra Boromar sits on the city council, and a number of other councillors are close allies of the clan. The family has ties by marriage to House Jurasco. Boromar attends every Skyway party. The family owns tenements throughout Sharn and invests in shipping, storing both legal goods and contraband in many of the warehouses in Precarious and Cogsgate. In many districts, local officials and Sharn watch officers have been taking bribes from the Boromars for generations. The criminal nature of the Boromar clan is an open secret, and in some districts, Boromar is seen as hometown heroes. There are immigrants who have made good common people who've risen to rival the barons and kings. They give the people what they want, whether it's untaxed gambling, cheap spirits, or Dream Lily. The clan operates with a degree of impunity because its operatives adhere to an outspoken rule. Whenever possible, criminal acts against individuals should target tourists and travelers. Boromar pickpockets don't prey on the people that they see every day. Instead, they seek out the many strangers who move around the city all the time. The watch officer who turns a blind eye to a pickpocket thus feels justified because it's not the citizens of Sharn who are victimized. Yeah, that is an awful lot. Well, you know, the D100 tables would have been an awful lot. Let me see. Boromar clan, NPCs. Saidan Boromar is the current patriarch of the family. He grew up in Lower Dora and worked as a thief and assassin there before taking over the organization. Mala Boromar de Jurasco is an heir of House Jurasco and a Boromar family matriarch. Her position in the family ensures that important members of the Boromar clan receive Jurasco healing service at no cost to them. Saidan reimburses Jurasco from the clan's treasury. Councillor Lyra Boromar, the eldest daughter of Mala and Saidan and a member of the city council. The Boromar's enemies on the council have grown bolder in the face of increased dask attacks against the clan, and some of Lyra's influence has eroded as a result. Halek Boromar is the family's chief enforcer, a recent immigrant from the Talenta Plains. Halek leads the Clawfoots, which are these species of riding dinosaurs that are over here. Probably they do things like horse races with them. The Boromar's personal guard and is also an accomplished warrior. Lissa Boromar is the family's leader in Calistan. She is ruthless, protecting her family's interests. And Castar, a gnome, is the lone non-halfling in the inner circle. He serves as Saidan's chief advisor and the organization's intelligent expert. The family looks to Castar to come up with a plan to defeat Dask, but so far none of his ideas have worked. The Shady Nightclub. The Boromars control gambling dens and nightclubs throughout Sharn. The fighter establishments are places for the Boromar clan to wine, dine, bribe, and extort the city's powerful elite. At the other end of the spectrum, the rundown gambling halls and Dream Lily dens in the poor districts are places where those in the employ of the Boromars plan heists. They store smuggled goods, they hide bodies and wanted criminals, they interrogate Dask spies, make good on threats, and unwind. These places are public and expertly run by the city's most powerful criminals, so an openly violent approach to problem solving in such a spot is likely to end in tragedy for the characters. When combat does occur in one of these nightclubs, it's usually because the instigators have brought enough strength of arms in order to take on the Boromars. So, here's a shady nightclub feature act, and so I can just imagine this would be pretty standard as far as two-story buildings would go. So, shady nightclub adventures, a D6 table. 1. Get accepted into a private high-stakes card game and try to win the grand prize. 2. Find out which Sharn Watch captain has a private meeting with a Boromar fence and steal whatever the captain is buying. 3. Track down a missing noble hunted by assassins. 4. Steal a hidden stash of Dreamlily. 5. Broke a deal with the Boromars on behalf of a city councilor who's too scared to face the family in person. Or 6. Find evidence that could be used to blackmail a member of a dragon-marked house. Okay, Boromar villains, a D6 table. 1. A halfling Dreamlily dealer who smooth talks new customers into sampling her wares. 2. A judge known as a turnkey who avoids rules in favor of Boromar clan members. 3. A halfling pickpocket using altered self to pose as a child of another race, planting contraband on people the Boromars are trying to frame. 4. A Boromar rogue has kidnapped a child of a strongly anti-Boromar city councilor. 5. A Kalishtar psychic serves the clan by detecting thoughts that suggest possibilities for blackmail. Or 6. A Boromar struggler is bringing unstable explosives or an especially addictive form of Dreamlily into Sharn, and innocents are being hurt. Boromar clan assignments. Find evidence of an affair between two members of different dragon-marked houses. 2. Collect from a fence who is late with a payment. 3. Steal the bank records of a city councilor. 4. Convince a Sharn Watch captain to aggressively root out Dask operatives. 5. Retrieve a package of Dreamlily that has gone astray. 6. Discover the location of a Dask safe house. Okay. Boromar clan adventure hooks. At D4 table. Dask Forges capture Boromar family members who are visiting Sharn from the Torlenta Plains. The Boromars offer a reward for the safe return of their family and a larger reward for the kidnappers' heads, leading to gang violence in the streets. 2. A beloved Sharn Watch captain who openly spoke out against the Boromar clan suddenly disappears. The Boromars claim they have nothing to do with it, but some Sharn Watch members use the incident as an excuse to go after the organization. 3. A changeling stole a smuggled artifact of great value from the Boromar clan. Boromar enforcers shake down people all over Sharn to find it, and clan leaders consider going to war with the tyrants. 4. The Boromar stage a festival in Caliston for Satan's birthday. All the family's allies will be there, creating opportunities for an espionage and an assassination. Okay, Dask. Formed by monstrous immigrants from Drome, Dask has been building its power in the Kyber's Gate and Melian's Gate districts of Sharn for the last decade. It's most infamous for its monstrous enforcers, but the organization also draws members from the destitute populace of Sharn. Largely goblins and shifters, but also humans, dwarves, and any other humanoid who feels like the current systems have failed them. Dask makes its money through acts of violence, from mugging to armed robbery to outright pillaging. The group has diversified in recent years, building an extortion racket, threatening violence if tribute isn't paid, and entering into the drug trade, selling both Dreamlily and a mysterious substance called Dragon's Blood. From the outside, Dask appears to be interested solely in fomenting violence and chaos. The monstrous nature of its members reinforces that impression. Most people consider the members of Dask to be savage beasts. The truth is a little bit more complicated. The Dromites who make up the core of Dask aren't merely criminals. They're elite soldiers of Drome working for Sora Catra, and part of an operation that is taking root in larger cities across Corvair. The seemingly random attacks by Dask are part of a larger plan that, if succeeds, will eventually give Sora Catra a foothold in the heart of Corvair. Dask operations. Violence and intimidation are Dask's most used tools. Rather than using bribery, Dask manipulates the Sharn Watch through displays of force and brutal reprisals against officers who dare to stand in the way. Coupled with the fact that Dask primarily targets businesses with ties to the Boromars, this means that many of the Watch officers of the lower wards will step aside and allow a Dask raid to run its course. Dask NPCs. Sora Catra is the ultimate leader of the Dask, but is as one of the daughters of Sora Kel. She remains in Drome. The hag stays in contact with all her main subordinates by magic and keeps a detailed ledger of the group's activities. Kavala is a disciplined female Oni and the current leader of the Dask cell in Sharn. She is the mastermind of the organization's machinations against the Boromar clan, a scholar obsessed with studying Sharn's manifest zone. Harash, a male Medusa, is Kavala's right hand. He's a specialty in diplomacy and intimidation whom Kavala trusts to mentor the members of the Dask and maintain morale. Ash is a female human priest of the Shadow. As the most powerful and beloved of Dask priests, she runs the Temple of the Six. Some worry that Ash plans to challenge Kavala for leadership, which could cause a rift in the organization's membership. The Gnoll Keshta commands a small unit of elite Gnoll commandos, disciplined and ruthless. These soldiers are often called upon to carry out retaliatory strikes against those who defy Dask. And Ziron, an elf, a werewolf, is a recent arrival to Sharn. He is one of the sons of the Dromish warlord Zyril. Ziron has come to the city with a small group of were-rats and werewolves and has an agenda known only to himself and Sora Katra. The Cog Hub. Dask members congregate in safe houses that are hard to find and easy to defend or escape from. The most popular gathering location is a Cog Hub. The dark, twisting halls of these underworld hotspots are familiar to Dask members and confusing to their enemies. The Cog Hub's tight passages have plenty of choke points, forcing one-on-one confrontations with which Dask's powerful monsters often have advantages. Dask also uses Cog Hubs to stash bodies, hide drugs, or prisoners. So this is effectively what it looks like. So the entrance leads to a shaft, up or down, into an underpass, down some stairs, and probably what is in the central talking location for anyone here. You know, if anybody were to venture without a guide, they go down this hall, they go down up and down these stairs, and, you know, they would most likely get themselves lost. Cog Hub Adventure is a D10 table. 1. You have to obtain a sample of dragon's blood hidden in the hub. 2. Infiltrate a Dask meeting to discover the next Boromar clan holding that they attempt to target. That sounds like a Bond bad guy organization. Well, it kind of is. Kind of in the sense that the person that's the head of the organization is a hag. And is probably, you know, somebody who is unequivocally doing something for evil purposes. So, you know, so the rest of the Dasks could be construed as the hired muscle of this one hag that has gone to every major city and has a particular interest in taking over Sharn. 3. Capture a Dask warg and replace it with a warg that's loyal to the Boromar clan. 4. Sniff out a traitor among Dask lieutenants. 5. Escape the Cog Hub after being captured by Dask forces. 6. Kick out squatters to get the Cog Hub ready to serve as Dask safe house. 7. Assault Dask members meeting in the Cog Hub to disrupt the organization. 8. Defend the Dask Cog Hub from a Boromar clan attack. 9. Rescue an injured Dask soldier hidden inside a Cog Hub that has been taken over by the Boromar clan. Or 10. Place a lethal trap in the Cog Hub to be triggered the next time a Dask forces enter the place. Dask villain. 1. Several harpies travel to the upper wards and use their luring songs to make rich people fall to their deaths. 2. A pack of gnolls rampage through the lower wards, killing any halflings that they come across. 3. A shifter priest of the Devourer wants to crash Skyway by performing a ritual to create a cataclysmic storm. Sacrifices of the Devourer fuel the ritual. 4. A changeling agent of the Dask seeks to frame the tyrants for attacks on the Boromar clan, driving a wedge between the two organizations. They are not subtle at all. 5. A were-rat priest of the Mockery starts a cult in Loredora, teaching its followers the arts of assassination. And 6. A gargoyle sharpshooter constantly finds new vantage points from the upper wards, from where it can assassinate targets in the middle and the lower wards. From the Sharn Inquisitive, Monstrous Deception. Monsters are infiltrating our city. Though the Sharn Watch acts through Dask as a problem only for Malian's Gate, and not a threat to law-abiding citizens, there is clear cutting in the criminal cabal's action. Their recent attacks have targeted properties throughout the lower wards, all owned by a certain halfling family, as if Dask were attempting a violent takeover of Sharn's underworld. Once these monsters control the city's crime, what will they do next? Dask assignments, a D6 table. 1. Convince several new businesses in the lower wards to pay protection fees to Dask. 2. Cause as much death and destruction as possible inside the Boromir-owned establishment. 3. Guard a priest of the Dark Six as he preaches the word of the mockery on the street. 4. Assassinate a member of the Boromir clan. 5. Convince the Dragonmark noble to offer the services to Dask for free. Or 6. Mug someone to steal a magic item in their possession. Dask Adventurer's hooks, a D4 table. Dask Harp, let me see. 1. Dask Harpies raid a Skyway mansion and tear the place apart looking for a Boromir clan member. 2. People who take dragon's blood begin turning into stone and nobody can figure out why. 3. Kavala announces a contest within the organization promising a valuable magic item to whichever Dask soldier kills the most members of a Boromir clan. Or 4. Ash challenges Kavala for control of Dask, creating a schism that erupts into a violent gang war. So, House Tarkanan, from the voice of Braylon, Assassins on the Loose. It is common knowledge that those with aberrant marks can't be trusted. It's not their fault. They're touched by Kyber, and the dragon below twists their minds. All aberrants will eventually become killers, and although I see the appeal in using these creatures as weapons against our enemies, how could we bring such vipers into our midst? According to a high-ranking source in the King's Citadel, the secret operation has predictably ended in disaster. After a few missions, the strike force slew the handlers they deserted, disappearing into the criminal underworld. They could be anywhere. There could be no clear sign that it's time to bring out the monarchy and institute a government that is chosen by and answerable to the common people. Long ago, the Dragonmark houses sought to exterminate the bearers of aberrant Dragonmark. So, as we recall, aberrant Dragonmarks are Dragonmarks that just kind of tend to appear on people and have unpredictable magical effects on those people. Today, those who carry aberrant Dragonmarks are still treated with fear and suspicion. During the last war, the King's Dark Lanterns of Brayland trained a team of covert operatives who all bore aberrant marks. Considered expendable, this group was sent on one suicide mission after another. I guess, yeah, you've already talked about Bond villains. These guys are clearly the Suicide Squad. 6 years ago, they fled to Sharn and founded House Tarkanan. This group takes its name from Lord Hallis Tarkanan, who fought the Dragonmark houses long ago, and he used his aberrant Dragonmark to destroy Old Sharn. The smallest of the 4 criminal organizations described here, House Tarkanan has no interest in claiming territory or dominating the criminal underworld. The house takes neither side in the war between the Boromir clan and the Dask, and will not assassinate high-ranking members of either organization. In other matters, it sells its services of all who have the gold to pay for them. House Tarkanan's top priority is using its wealth to protect, train, and care for people who have aberrant marks. The leaders of these houses are pragmatists and soldiers, and they retrain their recruits to be warriors and thieves. Despite its name, House Tarkanan is not a Dragonmarked house. It has taken the name to mock its enemies, and it doesn't have recognition, power, or the resources of a Dragonmarked house. In fact, many members of House Tarkanan hate Dragonmarked houses for being prejudiced against their kind, and fear they will instigate a second purge of aberrant marks. Others are more idealistic and see the growing power of the houses as a threat to all the nations of Corvair. And so, just in the interest of finishing, I'm going to skip from here to the Tyrants. So, the Tyrants. No criminal guild in Sharn is more shrouded in history than the Tyrants. This organization of changelings deals in secrets and lies, selling forgeries, running long cons, and treating identities as a commodity. The Tyrants have spies throughout the city, even in places where they have no current plans or contracts. This organization gathers as many secrets as possible, then sells that information to the highest bidder, uses it for blackmail, or stores it for a time when it becomes useful. The Tyrants have been operating in Sharn for over 300 years, from a base in operations in the Dragon Eyes district in Lower Tavix Landing. They have agents spread across the city. A beggar, a bartender, or a courtier could actually be a person or persona crafted by a tyrant changeling. The tyrants have a long-standing truce with the Boromar clan and don't take a side in the Halfling family's conflict with Dask. And finally, the Sharn Watch. A common viewpoint among the citizens of Sharn is that in the upper wards, the Sharn Watch works for the wealthy. In the middle wards, it works for the Boromar clan. In the lower wards, it doesn't work at all. This assessment is close enough to the truth. There is an important undercurrent in the situation. Although most officers of the Watch take bribes, that doesn't mean that all of them don't care about their city and won't try to keep their community safe. They do so because they see their benefactors as being an important part of the continued health of their community. For instance, the officers who take gold for the Boromar clan believe that the Boromars help keep the city running and give the people what they want. But if some strangers in town break the law, they're just troublemakers who deserve to be run in. As another example, the guards of the Dora Bazaar have an understanding with the gang of pickpockets known as the Little Fingers. As other thieves target only tourists and foreigners, the Watch will dismiss any charges brought against them. Why would an officer of the Sharnwath care if some Mundarian with more gold than sense ever gets robbed? But if the Little Fingers pick on a local, they're asking for trouble. That relationship works both ways. The pickpockets are privy to things that the Watch officers aren't, and they often warn the Watch about suspicious people or activities that they witness. Watch officers do exist who are entirely crooked and care for nothing for the law. At the other extreme, some officers are entirely honorable and replace the law above all else. And most of those are willing to risk their lives to save an innocent bystander from a rampaging Dask troll. But most members of the Watch are pragmatists who put the needs of their clients uppermost, the needs of the citizenry second, and generally don't take action against locals. The upshot of all this is that the Watch's response to a crime can vary significantly depending on the nature of the crime and where it's committed. As a rule, when a crime is committed in Skyway, any of the upper or middle wards, lower central, lower Tavix Landing, or precarious, members of the Watch arrive to intervene and investigate as soon as possible. In Cliffside, Lower Memphis, and Lower North Edge, the few Watch members in these locations address crimes in order of priority, in Lower Dora and the Cogs. The Watch's response is typically very slow. And so, there are hooks for the tyrants and there are hooks for the Sharn Watch, but, I really feel like I've shot my gun when it comes to the overall characterization of what an adventure in the city of Sharn is supposed to be. So, with that last paragraph, I do consider myself to be done reading Eberron Rising from the Last War. So, thank you, everybody who has, stood through for the whole series. This is probably the longest series that I've done so far, probably 7 parts long. And I know that there's other books ahead of me, and I know that they're probably equally as long. Devin says that this is just so cool. Yeah, I'm very interested in that, in what the Eberron landscape has provided for me, and I'm very likely going to be using it in the future episode of One Shots from the Meowing Portal. Yeah, you want a big old Eberron game. So you want a game that, encompasses absolutely everything about Eberron. Well, we'll see how, that all works out. But in the meantime, I do want to talk just very briefly about the next 2 books I'm probably going to read. So from D&D Beyond, I'm very proud to announce that I do finally have a copy of Dragonlance, which is the book that is going to be releasing publicly on December 5th. And I would read that one next, but I feel as though it's a little too new. By doing this, I'm just kind of having an unspoken contract with Dungeons & Dragons and Wizards of the Coast, a division of Hasbro, to make sure that, the information exists and information is available to people, but not in a way that it's going to infringe on their most immediate book sales. So, I want to make absolutely sure that, I'm going to be reading Dragonlance very soon, but I'm not going to be reading it immediately. So my very next book that I'm going to be reading from D&D Beyond is going to be, I had it in my mind and then it suddenly slipped me. So, right at TM. No, it was Tail. No, it was well, hang on, maybe I have it over to the side. So the next book I'm going to read is going to be the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, and so that's probably what I'm going to be bringing to you when I do Tabletop Lore beginning next week. In the meantime, I'm going to be archiving every part of this that I'm going to be doing, and it's going to go on the front page of my website, BrainyTheRPGcat.com. Be sure to look for that in a couple of days. And, well, that's it. That includes our broadcast day. That is the end of this stream. And so, I am going to be recording an episode of One Shots from the Mowing Portal tomorrow. And so I'm going to be doing that in the afternoon. If I have enough spoons after I'm done recording to actually do a stream afterwards, then I'll go ahead and I'll do a stream afterwards. But then you can look forward to the upcoming episode of Tales from the Mowing Portal this coming Wednesday. I'm going to be recording on Sunday, and it's going to take maybe me like 2 days in order to edit the final video. So we're going to be seeing that Wednesday night at 7 p.m. MST. And of course, I'm going to be giving you that in the calendar as well. So thank you everybody for tuning in. I think I would like to do a raid now. Let's see. Who would I like to pay a visit to? I think I would like to go over to... They might be interesting. Let's see. A lot of people on a Saturday. Well, you know, that much is to be expected. I think I would like to pay a visit to Jay Dockleton. Right now, he's in the middle of Played Up with Kite VR, and so they've been playing that pretty consistently over the past few weeks, but I think I have always raided Kite, and I have never had the opportunity to raid Jay Dockleton, so we're going to go to him right now. First, let's do a shout-out. Whoops. No space. There we are. Recently did a karaoke night with Grandpa. That's what we learned from that clip. Alright, so as I said, I might or I might not be on tomorrow. I will keep you notified over Twitter about that. But at any rate, look forward to the next episode of One Shots from the Meowing Portal coming this week. Thank you once again to GreatMedia.Games. For inexpensive TCG single cards, visit GreatMedia.Games and use the code TIMFINITY at checkout for 10% off of your online purchase. And also, well, OS Devin says, great stream, Brady. Thank you very much, Devin. I appreciate it. I always appreciate it. So... thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. Oh, don't forget about our donation campaign supporting Extra Life. We're going to continue to collect donations for that through December 31st. So, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a good night, everybody, and thank you so much for watching.